Imagine walking into an airport lounge, a place meant for comfort, privacy, and status. You've earned your place here through decades of hard work, strategic decisions, and navigating a world that hasn't always welcomed people who look like you at the top. This is Avery Johnson, a black CEO whose reputation precedes her, a woman who commands billions, reshapes failing companies into industry giants, and navigates boardrooms with unparalleled authority. Today, though, none of that seems to matter. As Avery settles into her carefully selected VIP seat, a sense of calm washes over her. She allows herself a brief moment of relief, a pause before the turbulence of travel swallows the mindless noise of the world outside. But peace is fragile. The hum of the lounge is suddenly pierced by entitlement. A wealthy white passenger approaches, eyes fixed on the seat Avery occupies. There's no politeness, no decorum, just a demand that she vacate the space she has every right to occupy. The staff, caught in a web of protocol, social discomfort, and subtle prejudice, nod compliantly, instructing Avery to stand. Shock hits her first, a visceral punch that freezes the body for a second, followed by the steadying pulse of anger simmering just beneath the surface. She rises slowly, dignified, her movements deliberate, every eye in the lounge following her like a ripple across still water. The whispers begin. Who is she? Isn't that the CEO of? Cameras subtly lift, phones angled toward her, capturing moments that would later go viral. But Avery does not flinch, does not react in haste. She has learned that timing is everything. The humiliation is sharp, a sting amplified by the eyes of strangers and the audacity of those who think their entitlement overrides human decency. Inwardly, Avery calculates. Every staff member who enabled this insult is cataloged in her mind. The hostess who issued the order, the flight attendant who nodded in agreement, the security personnel who hesitated. Every person will be held accountable, but not impulsively. CEOs like Avery understand the power of patience, the drama of silent calculation, and the impact of delivering justice on your own terms. Around her, the lounge continues in a strange rhythm. Hushed conversations, the clatter of luggage wheels, distant announcements, but every sound is filtered to the tension of the moment. Passengers glance, some uncertain, some openly curious, others subtly recording. The scene is electric with anticipation, though none yet realize that the storm has already been set in motion. Avery picks up her phone, a simple act that carries unimaginable weight. Every decision she will make in the next moments will ripple far beyond this lounge, beyond this airline, and into a story that will captivate thousands, perhaps millions. She allows herself a small, measured inhale, centering the fire inside. There is anger, yes, but also clarity. This is not about vengeance for its own sake. It is about respect, accountability, and ensuring that bias, entitlement, and disrespect are met with consequences that cannot be ignored. Every second counts. Every observer in this lounge is unknowingly part of a narrative they will remember. And Avery, calm and commanding, is about to become the author of that story. The audience, both in the lounge and later watching clips online, is primed for what comes next. The initial humiliation has set the stage. The reaction, when it arrives, will be electric. Passengers shift in their seats, whispering speculations, imagining the confrontation. The staff, unaware of the gravity of what they have triggered, continue to operate under the illusion that authority has passed them by. But Avery's mind is clear, her strategy precise. The storm is ready to break. And as she rises from the seat she was forced from, a quiet ripple of attention follows her movement. Every gesture she makes is measured, every glance deliberate. The lounge itself seems to hold its breath, knowing that an extraordinary act of authority is about to unfold, one that will redefine not just this interaction, but the perception of power, race, and respect in public spaces. The moment stretches, a heartbeat of suspense, as Avery surveys the room, the staff, and the passengers. She does not yet speak, does not yet act. The silence is a weapon, a coiled tension that builds anticipation. And within that silence, the narrative forms. Injustice recognized, patience measured, power poised to strike. The audience leans in unconsciously, craving the resolution that promises both shock and satisfaction. This is the calm before the storm, the meticulous build-up that ensures the payoff will be unforgettable. Avery Johnson, a titan of industry, a master of strategy and presence, is ready. And in the next moments, what seems like a small act of defiance, a simple phone call, will unleash a cascade of consequences that none present, nor those watching later, will ever forget. The moment Avery Johnson had been quietly preparing for had arrived. She lifted her phone, her fingers steady, her mind laser-focused. A few taps, a few calm words spoken into the device, and the chain of events that would redefine this lounge and everyone in it was set into motion. Her message was succinct, unambiguous. All personnel involved in the incident were terminated immediately, effective now. There was no hesitation, no debate, no bureaucratic delay. The decision had been made, and the world would witness its execution. As she set the phone down, Avery rose, her posture flawless, radiating authority that could silence a room without a single word. Eyes turned, whispers erupted, and cameras discreetly captured every inch of her poised movement. Passengers leaned forward in their seats. Some tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Others simply frozen, their jaws tight with disbelief. The aura around her was electric. It was a kind of presence that makes people stop breathing for a moment, caught between fear, awe, and anticipation. The staff froze, each one suddenly aware of the gravity of their actions. The hostess who had first spoken the order paled, realizing that a single moment of compliance with entitlement had just cost her career. The flight attendants who had nodded in agreement shifted uncomfortably, knowing that their hesitation and silence had consequences far beyond what they could have imagined. Security personnel who had lingered nearby, unwilling to intervene, now felt the weight of their inaction pressing down like a heavy hand. Each gesture, each expression, each bead of sweat on their foreheads told a story of shock and regret that only grew as Avery calmly surveyed the scene. Passengers began to murmur among themselves. Some were silently cheering, eyes glinting with satisfaction at witnessing justice served. Others whispered incredulously, "Did she just?" Phones were raised subtly to record the unfolding drama, but the power of the moment could not be contained by video alone. This was not mere spectacle. It was a demonstration of authority, precision, and the consequences of arrogance. Avery spoke then, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable force. "Everyone involved in this incident is terminated immediately," she said, enunciating each word with careful clarity. The impact was instantaneous. The words landed like a hammer strike, reverberating through the lounge, leaving no doubt that the insult they had delivered moments ago would not go unanswered. The staff exchanged frantic glances, realizing the severity of the situation. A few attempted to speak, to explain, to mitigate the damage, but Avery's gaze alone, sharp and unwavering, stopped them. There was no room for negotiation, no space for excuses. She had reclaimed control, and in doing so, she had redefined the balance of power in the room. Passengers leaned in further, drawn into the unfolding drama. Some gasped audibly. Others held their breath, sensing the rare spectacle of instant justice delivered with precision. The lounge that had seemed ordinary just minutes ago was now a theater of tension, emotion, and awe. Each reaction, each subtle movement, heightened the suspense, making the audience, both present and watching later, feel as though they were living through Avery's triumph in real time. The ripple effects were immediate. Phones recorded every motion, every glance, every reaction, ensuring that the story would not remain confined to walls of the lounge. Social media, when alerted, would explode with clips, comments, and debates. But in this very moment, the lesson was clear. Authority must be recognized, entitlement must be challenged, and injustice, no matter how subtle or brazen, carries consequences. As the staff absorbed the reality of the situation, Avery returned to her seat, reclaiming it with a grace that underscored her dominance. There was no gloating, no overt celebration, only the quiet confidence of someone who knows that power, when exercised correctly, leaves an indelible mark. Passengers continued to watch, captivated, as the narrative unfolded. This wasn't just about a VIP seat. It was about respect, recognition, and the profound impact of decisive action. Even after she sat down, the atmosphere remained charged. Whispers of admiration, shock, and incredulity floated through the lounge, mingling with the sounds of airport announcements and distant rolling luggage. Every detail mattered. The subtle expressions on passengers' faces, the tension in the staff's bodies, the quiet yet undeniable authority radiating from Avery. This moment was more than a confrontation. It was a lesson in presence, control, and the reversal of humiliation. By the time the airline staff processed what had happened, the lesson had been delivered with precision. Entitlement had been confronted, arrogance had been checked, and in the silence that followed, the power dynamic was forever altered. Avery Johnson had not only reclaimed her dignity, but had ensured that everyone present understood the cost of disrespect. Passengers who had initially watched passively now absorbed the full weight of the spectacle. Some admired her courage, some marveled at her calm, strategic approach, and others simply felt a deep satisfaction at witnessing injustice corrected in real time. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about accountability. The undeniable authority of someone who refuses to be diminished by the arrogance of others, and the profound satisfaction of seeing balance restored instantly. As the lounge slowly returned to its routine, the echoes of the confrontation lingered. Phones continued to record, whispers circulated, and the staff, now humbled, retreated into an uncertain silence. Avery sat quietly, composed, and the magnitude of her actions settled in. This was more than a moment of victory. It was a story that would be told, shared, and remembered. And as the passengers and staff absorbed the aftermath, one truth was unmistakable. Power, when exercised decisively and with clarity, cannot be ignored, and respect once demanded cannot be denied. Avery Johnson had not only reclaimed her seat, she had commanded the attention and respect of everyone in the lounge, leaving an indelible mark of authority that would resonate long after the moment passed. The immediate aftermath of Avery Johnson's decisive action rippled far beyond the VIP lounge. Passengers who had witnessed the scene began pulling out their phones, some to capture the moment for social media, others to share it privately with friends and family. Every subtle angle, every shocked expression, and every whispered comment was now documented, preserved, and ready to ignite a storm online. Within minutes, clips from the lounge began circulating, the story spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated. Avery herself remained composed, her demeanor unchanged, as if she had anticipated this very sequence of events. She understood that in a world where social media amplifies every injustice, timing and visibility are everything. By allowing the incident to be witnessed, she had ensured that her response would not just be a private victory, but a public statement. Every viewer would understand the gravity of entitlement when it met unwavering authority. As the footage spread, reactions poured in. Viewers around the country and even internationally were stunned by the audacity of the staff's initial actions and equally captivated by Avery's response. Comments flooded in, praising her calmness, strategic precision, and the instant nature of her justice. Some questioned whether such a response was extreme, but the overwhelming majority expressed admiration and validation, feeling a sense of catharsis on her behalf. For millions who had ever been humiliated, overlooked, or underestimated, Avery's actions resonated deeply. Back in the lounge, the airline staff who had been terminated were left in stunned silence. They realized that what had seemed like a small, justifiable decision to comply with a demanding passenger had escalated into a life-altering moment. Career, reputation, and credibility had all been undone in seconds. The staff exchanged nervous glances, struggling to comprehend how swiftly the balance of power had shifted. Every person who had participated, or even silently acquiesced, now faced the consequences of their actions in a manner both public and undeniable. Meanwhile, the passengers who had witnessed the event firsthand continued to process what they had seen. Conversations erupted, muted at first, then louder as people sought to make sense of the spectacle. "I can't believe she just fired them all," whispered one, eyes wide. Another muttered, "That's the CEO? Incredible." Cameras discreetly recording every angle ensured that the lounge itself had become a stage for an unforgettable performance of authority and retribution. The story quickly caught the attention of journalists and social media influencers. Clips were shared across platforms, accompanied by headlines emphasizing both the initial humiliation and the instantaneous consequences. Discussion threads exploded with opinions, debates, and admiration for Avery's decisiveness. Viewers dissected every moment, from her initial composure to the subtle gestures of control as she reclaimed her seat. The viral nature of the event only reinforced the power of presence, timing, and authority. In living rooms, offices, and online forums, people debated the nuances of the incident. Some focused on the blatant discrimination Avery had faced, dissecting the entitlement and prejudice that prompted such a moment. Others praised her measured yet uncompromising response, noting the psychological precision with which she delivered justice. Every replay, every analysis, only magnified the impact of the original act, cementing Avery's response as a textbook example of power executed flawlessly under pressure. Even as days passed, the viral momentum did not fade. Interviews with passengers, statements from witnesses, and commentary from social media personalities kept the story alive. The airline, facing public scrutiny and growing criticism, began to assess the fallout. Internal reviews and damage control strategies were initiated, but the narrative had already been defined. A black CO had been humiliated, yet she had reclaimed her authority instantly and decisively, leaving a lasting impression on both the public and the industry. The lesson extended far beyond the single lounge. People watching online felt a sense of justice served vicariously, a satisfaction that comes when someone who's been wronged is empowered to act. It was a reminder that patience, strategy, and self-possession can amplify power beyond the immediate context. Avery Johnson had not only protected her dignity, but had shaped a narrative that inspired, shocked, and commanded respect. Every detail mattered. The initial tension, the subtle glances of disbelief, the staff's frozen expressions, and the reactions of the passengers. Each element contributed to a story that was not just about firing employees, but about the reversal of humiliation, the assertion of authority, and the profound emotional resonance that makes such stories viral. Viewers were drawn in not only by the spectacle, but by the psychological depth of Avery's response, understanding that true power is as much about perception and timing as is about action. By the end of the day, the lounge incident had transformed into a cultural moment, referenced in discussions about race, power, corporate authority, and entitlement. It became a case study in how a single, well-executed decision can resonate far beyond its original scope, influencing perceptions, inspiring conversations, and reinforcing the idea that no one should underestimate the resolve of someone who has fought for every inch of their place in the world. Avery Johnson's quiet return to her seat after executing her plan was more than a personal victory. It was a statement on resilience, strategy, and uncompromising dignity. Every person who had witnessed the events, whether in person or online, would remember the tension, the shock, and ultimately, the satisfaction of seeing balance restored. In this viral narrative, the public was not merely an observer. They were emotionally invested participants, experiencing the thrill, the outrage, and catharsis of justice alongside Avery. The fallout from Avery Johnson's actions began to escalate almost immediately as news clips circulated online, showing the moment she fired the airline staff. Public outrage and admiration collided in a wave of discussion. The airline, once confident in its carefully polished image, suddenly found itself at the center of a storm it could neither ignore nor contain. Executives scrambled to craft statements, yet any attempt at damage control seemed feeble compared to the sheer power of Avery's narrative. Passengers who had witnessed the event firsthand began sharing their experiences across social media, offering detailed accounts that only intensified public interest. "I was sitting just a few rows away," one wrote. "She handled it with the calmest authority I've ever seen. I've never felt more respect for someone in my life." Videos circulated rapidly, and each replay amplified the story. As viewers dissected Avery's precise movements, her unwavering gaze, and the frozen expressions of the staff she had dismissed, the world could not look away. The airline issued a statement, attempting to downplay the incident as a routine personnel matter, but the phrasing only fueled further scrutiny. Observers quickly highlighted the stark contrast between the initial humiliation Avery endured and the decisive, immediate consequences she delivered. The public sentiment overwhelmingly sided with her, viewing the airline's response as weak, inadequate, and tone-deaf. Corporate reputation specialists scrambled to mitigate the damage, but the narrative had already been shaped. A black CO had been wronged, and she had claimed justice in a way that commanded global attention. Meanwhile, interviews and opinion pieces proliferated across media outlets. Journalists praised Avery's composure, noting the psychological mastery behind her actions. Some described the scene as cinematic, a perfect example of authority executed flawlessly under pressure. Others focus on the broader implications, discussing entitlement, racial bias, and the systemic dynamics that allow such incidents to occur in the first place. Avery's story became more than a viral sensation. It became a cultural conversation about respect, power, and accountability. Employees within the airline were now facing a reckoning of their own. Those who had witnessed the incident internally understood the risks of complacency and the consequences of failing to act ethically. Meetings were held, staff were reprimanded, and new protocols were hastily introduced to prevent similar incidents. Yet the psychological impact of Avery's actions lingered. Everyone who had participated, even passively, carried a memory of the CEO's unwavering gaze and the moment their careers had been instantly altered. The lesson was indelible. Authority, when exercised decisively, cannot be ignored. On social media, hashtags began trending, capturing the public imagination and creating a sense of collective participation in Avery's triumph. Hashtag VIP Justice, hashtags Oh Unstoppable, and hashtag Powership became rallying cries for those inspired by her courage. People from all walks of life shared personal stories of overcoming disrespect, drawing parallels to Avery's response. In doing so, the incident transcended a single airline lounge and became a symbol of empowerment and assertiveness in the face of entitlement and bias. Corporate leaders and executives took notice as well. Boards of directors, CEOs, and managers watched the footage, discussing the implications for leadership, authority, and crisis management. Avery's approach, calm, strategic, and instantly effective, became a case study in how to handle disrespect while maintaining control and command. It wasn't just a viral video that made waves. It was the psychological precision behind her every move. As the story continued to unfold, analysts began examining the broader societal impact. Conversations about racial bias, corporate culture, and accountability in service industries gained momentum. Avery Johnson was no longer just a viral figure. She had become a catalyst for dialogue about ethics, equity, and respect. The incident sparked debates, podcasts, and panel discussions, with her actions serving as both an example and a challenge. How do individuals confront injustice when the system seems to favor entitlement and prejudice? Within the airline itself, operational changes were initiated, but the cultural shift required could not be engineered overnight. Staff members were reassigned, retrained, and observed under stricter guidelines. Executives recognized that public perception had shifted permanently, and that the incident had set a precedent for how power dynamics would be judged in real time. The cost of underestimating someone like Avery Johnson had become abundantly clear. Even in the lounge, long after Avery had left, the echoes of the moment remained. Passengers recalled the subtle tension, the precision of her movements, and the unmistakable authority that had radiated from her every action. Some laughed quietly in disbelief. Others nodded with admiration, and all remembered that the balance of power had been recalibrated in an instant. It was a shared experience, a moment frozen in time that would be recounted countless times, not just for drama, but for the lesson in courage, strategy, and unwavering self-respect. By the end of the day, the story had reached a point where no apology, explanation, or corporate statement could diminish its impact. Avery Johnson had not only reclaimed her seat, her dignity, and her authority, she had set in motion a viral narrative that demanded attention, respect, and reflection. The airline staff, the passengers, and the global audience had all been participants in a moment that was at once shocking, cathartic, and undeniably memorable. This was more than an act of retaliation. It was a demonstration of strategic authority, the reversal of humiliation, and the power of decisive action. Avery had transformed what could have been a moment of personal indignity into a lesson in control, perception, and influence that resonated far beyond the walls of the VIP lounge. Her story, captured in real time and shared across countless screens, had become a template for empowerment, a viral sensation, and a cultural milestone that would not soon be forgotten. The story of Avery Johnson's lounge confrontation had grown beyond the confines of the airport. News outlets picked up the viral footage, replaying every second in slow motion, analyzing each subtle gesture, each expression, and the moment of absolute authority when she reclaimed her seat. Headline screamed, "Black CEO fires entire airline staff after VIP humiliation," and the story quickly dominated trending feed, news cycles, and social media discussions. It was no longer just an incident. It had become a cultural phenomenon. Executives across industries began taking notes. Leadership seminars and corporate training programs referenced Avery's calm precision, strategic patience, and decisive action. Analysts dissected the psychological mastery behind every movement, from her measured composure in a lounge to the instant, irrevocable decision to terminate the staff. People marveled at her ability to turn a moment of injustice into a commanding lesson of respect and authority. Meanwhile, the airline scrambled. Internal memos flew back and forth. Executives convened emergency meetings, and PR teams drafted statements that attempted, often ineffectively, to contain the narrative. The company's attempt to explain away the incident as a standard personnel matter only fueled the public's fascination. Online commentators dissected the disparity between the initial humiliation Avery suffered and the swift, unapologetic justice she delivered. Every social media post, every reaction clip amplified her story, creating a viral loop of shock, admiration, and disbelief. Public reaction was immediate and polarized. Millions were glued to their screens, some marveling at the audacity and power Avery displayed, others debating whether the punishment was too harsh. Yet across platforms, one thing was clear. Avery had reclaimed authority in a way few could even imagine, and her actions set a precedent for how power, race, and entitlement collide in public spaces. Memes, commentary threads, and video analyses proliferated, ensuring that her story would not fade quickly. The airline staff who had been terminated faced both professional and personal consequences. Their careers, once stable, now hung in uncertainty. They became the subject of online debate and, in some cases, public ridicule. Every attempt to justify or rationalize their behavior was met with scrutiny, contrasting sharply with the admiration directed toward Avery. She had not only won a personal victory, but had exposed systemic arrogance and the fragility of unearned entitlement. Beyond the immediate viral impact, Avery's actions sparked conversations about racial bias and authority in corporate and public spaces. Commentators discuss how society often underestimates the influence of black executives, especially women, in situations where entitlement and prejudice intersect. Avery's composure and strategic brilliance became a reference point for discussions on leadership under pressure, crisis management, and the intersection of social justice and corporate power. Her calm, deliberate return to the seat she had been forced from earlier was replayed repeatedly. The audience could see the subtle triumph in her posture, the unspoken message that respect is not given lightly but earned, and that those who challenge it face consequences. Every gesture was a lesson in psychological dominance, timing, and authority, leaving viewers captivated and inspired. In boardrooms and conference rooms, leaders examined Avery's actions as a case study in decision-making under duress. The balance she struck between patience, strategy, and instantaneous enforcement of consequences was dissected, praised, and taught. She had demonstrated that true leadership is measured not only in achievements, but in the ability to navigate humiliation and injustice with composure and precision. At the same time, the public sphere erupted. Social media platforms were flooded with comments like, "This is the most satisfying thing I've seen in years," and "She handled it with grace and authority. Total power move." Viral hashtags spread across platforms, with users sharing clips, commentary, and personal anecdotes connecting to Avery's story. She had become a symbol of empowerment, demonstrating how calm, strategic action can turn a moment of vulnerability into global influence. Even as the airline attempted to issue apologies and reassure the public that corrective measures were underway, the narrative had already been solidified. Avery Johnson's story was no longer just an incident. It had become a lesson, a viral sensation, and a cultural touchstone. Her calculated response had inspired millions, forcing individuals and institutions alike to reconsider how entitlement, authority, and respect intersect in modern society. The lounge itself became a legendary setting. Passengers who had witnessed the events in real time recounted the drama endlessly, sharing details that added depth, tension, and authenticity to the story. Friends, colleagues, and followers across the globe were captivated, experiencing vicariously the shock, awe, and emotional catharsis of watching injustice confronted decisively. Avery's mastery of presence and timing became an aspirational example, illustrating the transformative power of composure combined with action. By the end of the day, the incident had transcended its immediate context. It was no longer just about a VIP seat or a single airline staff misstep. Avery Johnson had crafted a narrative of empowerment, dominance, and viral impact that would be referenced in news cycles, social commentary, and leadership discussions for years to come. Her story reminded the world that injustice may strike unexpectedly, but strategic, decisive, and unapologetic action can redefine the balance of power instantly. The ripple effects were profound. Corporate leaders, executive, and individuals alike reconsidered the consequences of entitlement, bias, and inaction. For the public, it was a compelling drama that combined emotional satisfaction with lessons in courage, strategy, and authority. For Avery, it was a demonstration of mastery, not just in the boardroom, but in the public arena, showing that respect is earned and that power, when exercised correctly, cannot be challenged lightly. The days following Avery Johnson's lounge confrontation saw the story snowball into something far larger than anyone could have anticipated. News outlets continued to run extensive coverage, dissecting every angle of her decisive actions, and viral clips were now being watched by millions around the globe. From New York to London, boardrooms to casual social media scrolls, Avery's mastery of timing, presence, and authority dominated conversations. She had become a living example of how power, strategy, and composure can converge to reshape the perception of justice in real time. Within the airline, chaos reigned. Executives held emergency meetings, trying to control the narrative, but their efforts were largely ineffective. PR statements attempted to downplay the incident, framing it as a standard personnel matter, but the public wasn't buying it. Every social media post, reaction video, and commentary piece reinforced the reality that a black CEO had been wronged and had executed instantaneous, undeniable retribution. The airline's internal communications grew tense, with staff constantly checking their phones, aware that one misstep could now be recorded and shared globally in an instant. Meanwhile, Avery's influence continued to expand. Interviews were requested, podcast invitations poured in, and thought leaders hailed her as a symbol of strategic empowerment. Analysts praised her ability to navigate humiliation with grace, observing how she transformed personal affront into a teachable moment that inspired millions. Corporate leaders began incorporating her story into leadership seminars and crisis management workshops, demonstrating the art of turning adversity into authority. Public reactions were intense and varied. Some expressed awe at her calm precision, marveling at the psychological mastery she displayed. Others debated whether the punishments she delivered were excessive. Yet few could deny the power of her actions. Viral hashtags such as #VIPJustice, #SoUnstoppable, and #PowerShift spread like wildfire, with users sharing their own stories of confrontation, resilience, and empowerment. For many, Avery had become a figure of cathartic justice, someone whose actions provided emotional relief in a world where entitlement and arrogance often go unchecked. Within the lounge, the aftermath lingered. Passengers who had witnessed the incident replayed moments in their minds. The staff's frozen reactions, Avery's calm and commanding movements, and the undeniable shift in authority. These experiences were shared repeatedly online, fueling discussions and creating a sense of communal observation and involvement. People felt connected to the drama, not just as spectators, but as participants in a story that combined shock, satisfaction, and inspiration. The airline staff who had been terminated faced immediate personal consequences. Career trajectories were disrupted. Reputations were challenged, and public scrutiny intensified. They were forced to reflect on the choices that led to their downfall, realizing that compliance with entitlement and a lack of ethical backbone could have life-altering repercussions. The incident served as a lesson in accountability, demonstrating that actions taken in moments of convenience or bias can reverberate far beyond the initial context. Across industries, leaders took notice. The story became a benchmark for evaluating crisis response, authority, and the management of public perception. Avery Johnson's example illustrated that true leadership extends beyond professional success. It requires mastery of timing, poise, and the ability to assert authority decisively when provoked. Executives studied her behavior, dissecting the psychological strategies embedded in every movement and word, realizing that the impact was as much about perception as it was about action. As the story continued to circulate, the narrative expanded to encompass broader societal discussions. Conversations about race, privilege, and entitlement intensified, with Avery's actions serving as a tangible example of how individuals can assert themselves in spaces where systemic biases might otherwise undermine their authority. The incident became a touchpoint in discussions about workplace respect, corporate responsibility, and the power dynamics that exist in public settings. Meanwhile, Avery maintained her composure, moving forward with the same grace that had defined her from the start. She did not seek public adulation or validation. Instead, her quiet confidence amplified the story naturally. Each new viral clip, each media mention, each social media post further reinforced her authority, cementing her status as a figure whose actions spoke louder than words. In private, she reflected on the events with clarity. The humiliation she had endured was real, but it had been transformed into a moment of unparalleled impact. By acting decisively, she had not only reclaimed her dignity, but had also instilled a lesson that would resonate across industries and cultures. It was a demonstration of power exercised thoughtfully, strategically, and with precision, proof that patience combined with action can produce outcomes far more impactful than immediate, reactive confrontation. As weeks passed, the story evolved into a narrative with staying power. Discussions on leadership forums, news commentary, and social media continued to reference Avery's actions. She had created a viral, enduring example of justice, authority, and empowerment, demonstrating that a single, well-timed decision can change the perception of power, inspire millions, and leave a lasting mark on society. Even as life moved forward, the legacy of that day in the lounge remained vivid. Passengers remembered it, staff reflected on it, and the world continued to watch, learn, and share. Avery Johnson's name became synonymous with strategic authority, measured revenge, and the ability to turn personal adversity into global influence. She had not merely reacted to humiliation. She had orchestrated a sequence of events that would be analyzed, admired, and remembered for years to come. In every replay, every discussion, every viral share, the lesson was unmistakable. Power, when exercised decisively, cannot be denied, and respect, once demanded, commands attention. Avery had demonstrated the art of control, timing, and psychological mastery, leaving an indelible imprint on the world. A moment of shock, awe, and inspiration that no observer could ever forget. The story of Avery Johnson had now reached its culmination, but its impact continued to resonate far beyond the lounge and the viral videos. In the days following the incident, the world had watched, analyzed, and reacted to her decisive actions, but the deeper lesson lay not in the spectacle alone. It lay in the power of measured authority, strategic patience, and unapologetic self-respect. Avery had turned what could have been a humiliating encounter into a moment of enduring influence, a template for how to assert control when circumstances seem stacked against you. Public reaction remained fervent. Social media continued to buzz with commentary. Clips were endlessly replayed, and hashtags such as hashtag VIPJustice and hashtag SoUnstoppable became part of everyday conversations. Millions had witnessed her reclaimed dignity and authority, and the emotional resonance of that moment only deepened with time. People saw themselves in her, those who had ever been marginalized, underestimated, or humiliated, and felt a vicarious thrill in seeing someone rise above injustice with such clarity and power. Meanwhile, the airline faced ongoing scrutiny. Internal reviews, policy overhauls, and staff retraining programs were launched in the wake of the viral scandal. Executives realized that reputational damage was long-lasting, and the lesson Avery had delivered was irreversible. Failure to respect authority, disregard human dignity, and enable entitlement carries consequences. Staff who had been terminated faced permanent setbacks in their careers, and the incident became a cautionary tale in the corporate world, referenced in leadership training sessions and organizational ethics discussions. Avery herself continued her life with poise. There was no gloating, no unnecessary fanfare, only the quiet assurance that she had executed justice with precision. Every public statement, interview, or appearance reinforced the message. Respect is earned, dignity is defended, and power, when wielded strategically, commands attention and shapes perception. Her actions became case studies in boardrooms, seminars, and classrooms, demonstrating the psychology of authority and the art of turning adversity into global influence. The lingering impact on passengers, staff, and observers was profound. Those who had witnessed the incident firsthand recounted it repeatedly, sharing not just the events but the emotional weight of the confrontation. Each retelling emphasized the tension, the shock, and the ultimate satisfaction of seeing a wrong corrected decisively. Online, the story became a symbol of empowerment, inspiring countless individuals to assert themselves in situations where bias, entitlement, or disrespect threatened to undermine their presence. In the broader social and cultural context, Avery's actions sparked conversations about race, gender, and leadership. Commentators, influencers, and academics dissected the incident, exploring its implications for systemic bias, entitlement, and public authority. Avery Johnson became more than a CEO. She became a symbol of resilience, strategic thinking, and the ability to command respect in a world often resistant to acknowledging it. Her story highlighted the importance of patience, calculated action, and understanding the power dynamics that govern public spaces and professional environments. Reflection on the moment reveals a deeper psychological insight. Avery's success was not just in firing the staff or reclaiming a VIP seat. It was in the way she orchestrated every second to maximize impact. Her calm demeanor, strategic pauses, and deliberate gestures created a narrative that amplified the emotional and psychological resonance of the event. This was a lesson in silent power, the anticipation of audience reaction, and the subtle yet unmistakable exertion of influence. As months passed, the viral footage and ensuing discussions continued to circulate. Avery's decisive action remained a benchmark for effective leadership under pressure. Corporate leaders studied her strategy, educators referenced her composure, and millions of viewers continued to draw inspiration from her example. She had transformed a moment of personal affront into a lasting symbol of authority, respect, and empowerment, an enduring story that transcended the original incident, teaching lessons about human behavior, strategic action, and the consequences of arrogance and entitlement. Ultimately, Avery Johnson's lounge confrontation serves as a reminder that true power lies not in reaction, but in mastery of timing, perception, and strategic decision-making. Humiliation can be transformed into triumph, disrespect into authority, and a single, decisive action can reverberate across industries, societies, and cultures. Every viewer who witnessed a story, whether in real time or online, became part of that narrative, sharing in the awe, the shock, and the satisfaction of seeing justice delivered with precision. The airline, the staff, the passengers, and the global audience all experienced the ripple effects of that single, orchestrated moment. Avery had achieved more than retribution. She had created a viral, enduring lesson in authority, strategy, and dignity. Her name became synonymous with calm dominance, strategic action, and the ability to turn adversity into influence, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who encountered her story. In the end, the narrative of Avery Johnson is one of resilience, empowerment, and the transformative power of deliberate action. It reminds us that while injustice may occur unexpectedly, those who respond with strategy, clarity, and unwavering self-respect can not only reclaim their own authority, but also reshape the world's perception of power in a single, unforgettable moment. Her victory was complete, not through anger, but through mastery, not through rashness, but through calculated, decisive brilliance. Avery Johnson had not only reclaimed her seat, she had redefined the rules of respect, authority, and influence for a global audience, and the echo of that moment would resonate forever.